Hi, I'm Peter Kelmström of Kelmström.com Business Solutions. In this demonstration, I will go through the module on online features of SharePoint. This course so far has been focused entirely on things that can be done both on-premise and in the cloud. But Microsoft are definitely focusing very hard on the online features. So you might want to go through that so that people know all the things that are possible if you go with online, because that is a discussion that most of your attendees will be involved in at one point or another. So that's important for everyone to know. So let's start with an overview of this. This story is not entirely true. Some of those features can be done on premise too, but in most cases they are not. Also, Microsoft is changing the story very much about hybrid solutions. So you can have some features that are online and some that are on premise, and you can mix your SharePoint installation to have the best of both worlds. So I'm saying that these are features that are not on premise. That's not entirely true, but these are features that are difficult or impossible to get in on premise. So that's the background. So there's a lot of features here, and some of them are in beta, some of them are in open betas, closed betas, and so on. So this slide might change what's in current and what's in the future as you keep given this class. But and some of these features might actually be rolling out for on-premise also. So this is a deck that you might want to change in the future. But what I'm going to do now is just go through these different things. So I have a few slides on each and every one of these. There we go. Except for the groups and the Azure backend and the planner. So let's talk about that. In a previous demonstration, in a previous slide, I had the planner. That's one of I had a demo on that I linked, so that's available. The IRM, the groups is if you've gone through this entire course, and this is of course is the last deck in the 5-day course, then groups is very simple. It's take away all the customization options. You feel free to do a demo on groups because people should know that those are there, and that's a very common use case that you want to use SharePoint, but you want to take away all the complexity. Well, Microsoft has already done that with groups. And the reason we haven't talked about that much is that there's really not that much to say. You can't really customize anything. It's just uploading files, creating folders. There's no categorization in terms of extra columns. There's no views. There's no content types. All those complex stuff are not there. And you can't add new apps to it. You can hardly develop on top of groups. You can't import data. You can't export data based on group. You can search. But groups is a very limited feature, but it might be just right for you. Another important thing is that you can turn them on or off. That's about all you can do as an admin. And if you turn them on, which they're turned on by default, then anybody in your organization can create their own groups. So that in a way, it allows everybody to solve their own IT problems in terms of what can be done within a group, but it also takes away any chance that your IT department had of controlling the flow of information. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend going with groups. On the other hand, as we've discussed a lot during this course, we want to make it simple for people to solve their own IT problems. If they don't, they'll just solve their own IT problems with an Excel spreadsheet, an Outlook folder, or a file folder. And those are all three worse than SharePoint groups. So if that's, you probably already lost control of your IT information flow or your information flow within the company anyway. So I think putting things in groups is certainly better than all those three mentioned information shares. So you might want to go with groups because of that. But the best thing is, of course, if you do a proper SharePoint rollout and you have some information strategy around that and use the SharePoint customization options and the control options that we have talked about in this course. So that's about groups. And the planner we talked about. The Azure backend. Azure is, of course, a whole different course and a set of features. But it's important to know that when you connect to SharePoint Online or Office 365, then you also get the whole Azure backend. So you have an Azure subscription in the backend. That means that you can run SQL Azure databases. That means that you can do, you have an Azure AD that you log in against. A lot of those things exist as part of your subscription. So you only need to activate that and start using it. A part of it is already there. The Azure AD is already there, for example. But if you want to use the more advanced features, you need to activate the Azure backend also. And that is a platform that's growing day by day, and there's so much there. But you might just want to mention that that's a possibility to go into. I don't have any slides on those three. So, but let's go through the other ones. I do have slides on those. So let's start with IRM. When you upload a file, or when you use a file in general, you usually place it somewhere so that it's secure. In a file folder or in a SharePoint site, and you set permissions very meticulously on that information store. However, when you allow people to view that information in a SharePoint site, if you allow them to download the file to their computer or attach that file to an email or put it on a USB stick, then you've lost all control whatsoever over the file. So anybody that can access the file can then distribute it altogether, which is of course a huge issue that most companies don't really think about. So what IRM allows you to do is encrypt the file, each and every file that's uploaded to a SharePoint document library. This can also be done in Exchange, by the way, but you encrypt the file on the file level. And then you can control what can be done with this file. Should this file be allowed to be printed? Should this file be allowed to be forwarded outside the organization? Should you be allowed to take screenshots of this file? Should you be allowed to copy and paste? All of those things can't really be done in any other way than IRM. So what happens is when you open such a protected Office file, these are Office files we're talking about, then Microsoft Office, including Microsoft Office Online, connects to the IRM server and checks what permissions do this user have on this file. So that's a very important distinction. So even if it ends up on a stick, a USB stick, or attached to an email, the file will be encrypted and will be very hard to open it unless you connect to that IRM server, log in, and get the proper permissions. So that's an important distinction. This is also called Azure Rights Management, and you could, well, this is a more technical background of what it's doing. You can connect your Windows file services to it too, and you can also, of course, connect to on-premises services. So this can be done on-premises also, but it's done by default in Office 365 SharePoint Online. So you only need to configure this, that you're using this service, and then you can configure what permissions should be available on each document library. So the users only have to upload the files to a particular document library, and they will get the encryption without any additional work on their part. So this is a really powerful feature, and when you start talking about security in SharePoint Online, people will start talking about, it's in the cloud, and they will talk about NSA and lots of different things. But when you start talking about this level of security, that's something that most people have not even heard of or know that it's possible to do. So this kind of raises the whole bar for how should you think about, how should you work with security. So that's an important discussion that people should know, that they have this option in Office 365. All right, leaving IRM, or Azure Rights Management, which it's also called. Moving on to Delve. Delve is a search-based homepage, kind of like Pinterest. If you've tried that, you can pin things to this. You can find relevant information that's relevant to you. This is not going to come in on premises because it's kind of an AI thing. The example that was given when Delve was introduced was that if I present some information, I do a presentation on in PowerPoint during a Skype for Business meeting, and later on I change that presentation. Since I gave you that presentation in a Skype for Business meeting, the SharePoint or the Office 365 environment knows that you're probably interested in that content because you were there in the meeting and presumably listening to that content. So that will show up, and it will also track what have you been searching for, what have you been promoting. So it's showing things that are relevant to me. It's trying to analyze the information flow in the organization and showing me stuff that's relevant to me. Very, very hard thing to demo, of course, when you're starting a new environment, but you might want to ask people to play around with this and come back to it several times before passing judgment on it. So I don't have a demo on that, but it's a really powerful thing. SQL Azure databases, Access, we talked about this. You can also put other SQL databases in the cloud as part of your Azure subscription, but putting SQL Azure databases is really powerful because you can connect to them from any device really and build really powerful things. So this is a really cool feature. Then you have Sway, which is the PowerPoint reimagined and touch optimized. So if you have a good demo on this, I put a link in a previous slide deck also to some Microsoft demos on this. And this is, of course, something that people will probably think is fun to play around with if you can find a good, story for them to tell, because that's what it's about. It's about telling stories or swaying people to your opinions. So if you can find a good story for your users to do, they'll probably appreciate doing a Sway lab. And then you have Yammer. Yammer is some social experience. I've been talking to people about that Microsoft will probably build Yammer into SharePoint eventually, but so far that doesn't seem to be the way they're going. Yammer is still a separate product, and there's a separate login and all kinds of issues regarding the separateness of these two products. So if you want a more social, more graphical, more Facebook-like experience on your SharePoint, Yammer might be the tool that's right for you. It used to be very popular, but but I haven't really heard any customers that are using it lately. I've had a lot of people that are trying it, but getting disappointed with it. So I wouldn't spend too much time on Yammer, but you can certainly give it a spin and ask your users to sign up for it and start liking and sharing and those kind of things. And it's certainly a lot more powerful than the built-in newsfeed. You can also show that you can disconnect the default newsfeed and use Yammer instead. But the whole problem of, where are we storing our information? Is it in Yammer or is it in SharePoint? That becomes difficult for me and hard to motivate. So that's why I usually don't recommend using Yammer. But it's a cool thing, definitely. Power BI. This is the kind of use case that you would use Power BI for, building dashboards. The cool thing about it is that it doesn't require much setup. It requires that you have some data somewhere in SharePoint lists, in SQL databases, in Access databases, in CSV files, in Excel files. You just upload that data and then you can start building your Power BI reports like this. You probably don't want to build your balance sheet report, something like that. It's rather key performance indexes, stuff like that. You should also be aware that there is an issue in Power BI regarding the licenses for these. So it might incur extra cost using Power BI. So that's something you want to look into before starting to use it. But of course, these are the kind of things that are really popular. People tend to really like this kind of input and building these kind of dashboards. So yeah, I would certainly recommend doing a short demo on this, getting started with Power BI too. People will probably like that a lot. Then you have Flow. Flow is a new product that's currently in beta. It's a workflow engine, but and we've had a chapter on workflows. Eventually, as this as time progresses and Flow matures more, I think you should probably focus more and more away from traditional workflows and into Flow. This is for personal productivity, more than a work group functionality, really. So it's a slightly different use case. It's a lot more powerful, though. It has triggers based on email and file stores on top of SharePoint lists. SharePoint lists are there, of course, also. So that is when an email is received, then you can do a lot of things based on that. There are lots of connections, so you can. It's based on another product called If This Then That, which has been very popular. So you create rules for exactly that. If this happens, then do that. And it's been a popular platform, and it's really powerful. You can also connect it to web-based services. So if you have some web-based services of your own that you can control, you can do lots of interesting things here. You can create templates of your own flows, and you can also do approvals here, of course. So that's a cool feature. Here's some templates, and you see how this is branded. It's not really a developer kind of UI. This is very much for the end users. So once this comes out of beta, you probably want to do a few demonstrations or even labs based on flows. I think this is really cool. And this is something that Microsoft's putting a lot of effort into also. And of course, this is one of the answers to what's going to happen when SharePoint Designer disappears in the future. Flow is part of what's going to happen. Finally, we're going to talk about Power Apps. This is a visual rapid application development tool, even more rapid application development than Access that we talked about before. So again, you should probably move forward and move more towards Power App as this course matures, but it's still in beta, so probably don't want to do it now. And I don't have any ready-made demos on Power Apps yet, but I think this is a powerful new feature that you want to move ahead on eventually. It integrates well with flows. It has a form designer. That's what it's for. It's for building forms. These are mobile apps. They are created in a dedicated host app, and they bypass the App Store. So if you want to do apps, lots of apps for your enterprise, this is a tool to use. This is an enterprise tool in most cases. So you would have some kind of content that you want people to update or read on their mobile devices. So you would create a form that displays that information. And as we'll see in some screenshots, it allows you to really work with that data. And this is native application, so it's not a web window towards SharePoint really, but it's compiling native applications for both Windows, Android, and iOS, of course. So let's move forward here. This is how it looks. So you install this Power Apps application and you select where to get the data from. And as you see, you have Dynamics, powerful, OneDrive, yes, powerful too, OneDrive for Business, Salesforce, and SharePoint Online. So those are the app sources. And of course, the one you'll be focusing on is SharePoint Online. And then you can create a blank app or an app template. And those app templates are based on these tools. As you see that there are some controls there, not that many of them, but you can build your UI using this. And as you see at the top here, there's just a play button there, which allows you to run this as it would look on the device. So it's really powerful, and this is how it ends up looking. At the end, you would get a SharePoint site with some content, and if you look at that content in a browser, it would look like this. The same content would look like this, very responsive as you see. Finally, you have the Graph API. This is a development tool. You just need to mention that. And this is an attempt to try to unite a lot of the different APIs. SharePoint and Office 365 has a lot of different APIs. Now you can use those using the REST interface, and as you see, you can connect to a lot of different things: users, groups, files, mail, calendars, personal contact. Those are all the Exchange bits, of course, but then you also have Excel and Notes, so there's a OneDrive things also there, so that are of course SharePoint based. So this is an interesting thing that the Microsoft are pushing a lot. That's already out there, so it's not really in beta and it's not really a no-code thing, but you should be aware that it's there, and it simplifies development quite a bit. All right, that concludes this demonstration.